My name is Cindy Bizzle. I'm the state administrator of the North Carolina Guardian Ad Litem program.
I'm Carolyn Green. I'm the regional administrator for the southern region for the Guardian Ad Litem program.
I am Jody Livengood, District 20 District Administrator for Stanley, Union, and Montgomery County.
My name is John Michael Heyman. I am the GAL supervisor for District 20, Stanley, Union, and Montgomery counties.
And I am Chantel Aviel. I am the Guardian Ad Litem supervisor in Union, Stanley, and Montgomery counties.
In the 1970s, there was a movement across the United States where judges were beginning to feel that they didn't have sufficient information in child abuse and neglect cases that they heard. And in the late 70s, there was a judge in Seattle, Washington, who wanted to see if there were just some average citizens who cared about kids who would be willing to volunteer and come into court and give him further information about the cases he was hearing. So he asked one of his staff to convene a community group. And at the given time and date, he thought he might have 4 or 5 people in a room. He went into the meeting room and there were over 60 people there who wanted to hear more about how they could give their time and influence the lives of children who were in distressful situations, how they could influence those children's lives for the better through giving judges information that they could use in their decision making. That movement caught hold in North Carolina at about the same time, when in the late 70s, judges said in serious abuse and neglect cases that an attorney could be appointed to represent the best interests of the child. And that attorney was called a guardian ad litem. The following year, judges had such success hearing from these early attorneys, the law was changed in North Carolina so that every child abuse and neglect case had an attorney appointed. And so here we are at the late 70s. And what begins to happen is kind of a groundswell of community involvement across the country where citizen volunteers are kind of piloting and experimenting with ways that they could help bring a community voice and further information about children to judges who were on the bench making decisions about these kids' lives. So in 1983, the North Carolina Guardian Ad Litem program was established, and our law said that there would be a guardian ad litem appointed for every child. And when that guardian ad litem was not an attorney, that an attorney would also be appointed. So what happened was there were 3 pilot programs that looked at different ways to use community volunteers and staff and attorneys. And this model of appointing a lawyer and a volunteer was the one that was deemed kind of the most effective model. And so the North Carolina Guardian Ad Litem statute made provisions for programs that had a staff member, community volunteers who would be trained by that staff member, and lawyers who would be appointed with those community volunteers to represent the best interests of the children as they came to court. So the program was established in 1983. In 1985, the first Guardian Ad Litem staff member was hired in the 20th Judicial District, which included Union, Stanley, Anson, Richmond, and Moore counties. A second staff member was hired in 1988, and this person was Martha Sue Hall. She was the second district administrator, or at the time they were called coordinators, but she was the first person who was able to recruit and train sufficient volunteers to really represent the needs of the children in the community. And it was that original kind of crop or group of volunteers that began to really make a positive name for the program in the community, as well as make a big difference in the lives of children. There were 2 other district administrators who led the program since then. Ian McConaughey was a district administrator, and he was followed by Shanika Weeks. And then later, Carolyn Green was brought on as the next leader of the program.
Okay, so a big question is, how does a guardian ad litem get involved in a child's case? So let's lay the foundation for how that happens. So the Department of Social Services in a county receives a report for an issue involving a child. It is their job to investigate whatever that report is. So Department of Social Services conducts their investigation. There are times when the results of their investigation leads them to petition the court. The allegations are serious enough and proven to be believable enough to petition the court for the court's attention in a case. Once the district court for that particular county receives that petition, we, the guardian ad litem, are automatically appointed to those cases, and that activates our involvement in those children's cases. So that brings us to, what is the role of a guardian ad litem volunteer?
And ultimately, the role of a guardian ad litem is to serve as that child's voice in court, and they do that in multiple ways. They help the court work towards safety and permanence for that child. They conduct independent investigations that deal with the safety of that child, the child's best interest, what their needs are, and then all that information is provided to the court and to the child's attorney advocate. And then in the investigations and the interviews that the guardian ad litem conducts, they learn what that child's wishes are, and then they can express those wishes to the court, and that is serving as the child's voice.
So what kind of recommendations do your volunteers make to the court?
Our volunteers will make recommendations regarding placement, where that child should live, if that child should go home, if they should remain where they are. That they can make recommendations for any kind of treatment the child might need, any services that child might need, and also what their case should look like as far as permanence, meaning, should this child go home? Should this child be adopted? Should this child remain, in some sort of relative or kinship placement on a permanent basis?
So when you're in court, you mentioned a lawyer, so what does the lawyer for the guardian ad litem program do?
Well, the lawyer for the guardian ad litem program technically represents the child in the case. The child is our GAL attorney's client. So our guardian ad litem attorney is advocating legally for that child in court, and basically protecting and advocating for the child's legal interest in court, and participates as part of the team. We're a team in court with the guardian ad litem attorney, the guardian ad litem staff, as well as the volunteer. So it's like you mentioned before, the model that was chosen was the attorney, the staff, and the volunteer as sort of a three-pronged team to approach cases in court.
So now we're at July of 2013, where I became the volunteer supervisor for the program, and I was assigned to Stanley County as well as working sometime in Union County. And when I came to the program, there was only a few volunteers, so I really had to get the word out about this program and really advocate and find resources where I could put an ad in the newspaper or speak about what we do so that we could recruit and train volunteers. And during that time, it was a short, brief time before we obtained 100% coverage in Stanley County. Once the word got out, people started talking about the program, volunteers started coming in, trainings took place, and we were at full force advocating for the children here in Stanley County. One of the good things about working here was finding such a diverse group of people. We had some that just graduated high school, we had retirees, we had seniors, we had males, we had professors. So there was a great diverse group of people that decided to become advocates here in Stanley. And it was a need because we wanted to make sure that when they were assigned to cases, they could really relate to children. You know, maybe having a male and a male child, a younger volunteer, you know, over the age of 18 with maybe a teenager that could really talk to them and relate. So one of the good things about working here in Stanley, there is a diverse population, and there was a nice pool to choose from. And that was one of the things that I focused on, was really sharing what we did and how could we bring these people in and tell a friend. And it began to cultivate relationships in the community with different agencies. And then later I became the district administrator and moved away to Union County to primarily work, and I hired Jody Livengood, who became the program supervisor here in Stanley, and she carried the torch to continue cultivating relationships.
So in 2016, just as Carolyn Green has explained, the recruitment and continuation evolved over time between her and I. And this continued in 2019 when I became the district administrator. And one of the things that we truly enjoyed about this program was not only the mission of the program, but something that we like to refer to as the 3 C's: community, connection, and commitment. And we feel like that is really important when it comes to the community, especially here in Stanley County, but throughout any county within North Carolina. Once you have the community involvement, which we were involved in, such as serving with local nonprofits, other agencies within the community, such as Esther's House, partnering with the Department of Social Services to speak to the foster parents. One of the state projects that we joined in was the Peanut Butter and Jelly campaign. And we would collect over 1,000 jars of peanut butter and jelly, and we would donate those items to places such as Christian ministries. We also volunteered our time as staff to make those connections within the community. We would partner with other programs within the community, and we would network with those people, packaging presents for children, for those in need. In addition to that, we partnered with businesses locally, such as Glory Beans and Sundries. We would hold our meetings with the volunteers so that we could foster that connection and foster the commitment within the program. Another part of our program that we like to speak about is partnering with other professionals within the Rotary community. So we would go to the Rotary clubs and present our information. If you believe in the word commitment, then you understand in order to have that commitment, you truly thrive off of that community involvement. And when you believe in the mission, then it's contagious.
And one of the things, Jody, I remember was when we really revved up our training program and started training for our volunteers, finding spots. Some of the community churches would allow us to use their centers, and the town hall in Locust allowed us to have trainings there because we didn't have a big training room. So we really had to get out in the community and meet people that would allow us to utilize their space so that we could train our volunteers, because we go through that 6 to 8 week program depending on which training that you would be assigned to. But we had to partner those relationships in order to get training space. So we met a lot of great people here. You know, I think about the church in Locust and the town hall, how they just readily opened their space for us to use without even, them not even being there, but trusting us and building those relationships. I'm hoping probably brought some volunteers from just meeting some of those folks.
And I think this also has extended into Montgomery County now, where we recently partnered with local businesses in downtown Montgomery County. And the support of Stanley County, Montgomery, and Union has just been extremely welcoming, even during transitions throughout the years. So it's much appreciated.
Can I just mention that the judicial district that existed in 1983 when the state program was begun, and in 85 when the District 20 program began, that district has undergone some changes. And several years ago, Richmond and Moore counties were removed from the judicial district, and then later Anson County was dropped from this district and added to another, and the district today has the addition of Montgomery County with Union and Stanley, as you mentioned. I was thinking back to the legacy of District 20 and remembering that there was an opportunity for this district to become a family court district. And Judge Ron Burris was the chief district court judge at the time, and he worked with parents' attorneys, guardian ad litem attorneys, guardian ad litem staff, volunteers, with social workers, social work attorneys, all of the people who provide service to children and families that come into district court. And he helped lead the formation of family court here, and that, I think, was a milestone for this district in that the leadership in the court asked everyone to really work together on behalf of children, even though when they would come to court, they would be sitting at different tables, presenting different points of view. But there was a sense of community, and we're all in it for the children and families in this community. That was fostered by the beginnings of the family court and its work here. So Chantal, you and I have something in common, that we both started this work as volunteers. And so tell me a little bit about your start as a volunteer and how that started you on the path that you're on.
Awesome. I started as a volunteer in 2016, and I quickly, within the first couple of weeks of having my first case, fell in love with the work. And I said, oh, I can do this for the rest of my life. And I stayed as a volunteer for a little bit over a year, and then I was brought on as staff, and I started working with volunteers. And I said, oh, no. This is what I love. I was humbled by seeing the volunteers that I worked with and the work that they did and the heart that you have to have for this work. And, just the lengths they would go to advocate for these children was so humbling to me, because I thought I was a good volunteer.
Right.
But yeah, it's been amazing to see just how dedicated our volunteers are, because there's no other motive besides advocating for that child. Helping that child is their sole motivation, and that's what's been the most beautiful thing, working with the program.
Nice. I remember I became a volunteer in the 80s, and the charge for volunteers at that point was to help find services for volunteers. I think our volunteers now, they learn about services and resources that are available in the community, and then they try to puzzle together what services would really serve children best and their families. But I was working with a child whose mother really had a hard time dealing with her anger issues, and she kept hurting her child who was in the first grade. And I learned that mom had an uncle not too far away, an hour or so away. And as a volunteer, I went and talked to this man, and I didn't ask him if he would, have the child come live with him, but I was just kind of checking him out. And then I came back and talked to my supervisor and the social worker, and it turned out that the little girl went to live with this uncle of hers, and he was very able to manage the mom and her anger because it was his sister. And so I think sometimes volunteers come up with solutions that maybe social workers or other service providers either don't have the time to think of because of their bigger caseloads, or maybe it's just in a casual conversation with a child. You learn about something as a volunteer, and you're able to kind of take it a little bit further because volunteers do have that luxury of time. And I agree with you about when you were a volunteer and you thought, yes, this is the greatest, it was the greatest job for me because it demanded something of me as a member of a community to really reach in and bring my strengths from just living and to bring to bear on the life of a child. So, yeah.
And I think about, Cindy, how when I first started, volunteers had handwritten reports. They faxed reports in for you to type over for them. They would come into your office and you would kind of they would, dictate and you would write. And I know things have evolved since then. Our program has just really changed, and I think come up with the times. As years roll on, we all progress. Everything has to change, and I think now there's been a great shift in what we do, but there's always still that focus of the best interest for the child. And Jody probably can speak on some of the new things that have rolled out in recent years.
I think what is striking to me is when I first started in 2013, we would train the community volunteers as though you were in a classroom. So you would have a book and you would have a structured agenda and you would go through the book and you would have book work. And since then, in 2014, my experience was to then start training using what's called the Moodle room, where that volunteer can now do independent learning, which is held online, in addition to coming in person for training once a week. Since then, it evolved to now, currently, it's all virtual training, which is very unique because now it reduces the traveling to training, where that volunteer now can be at home, can learn, or be in a different environment learning, whether it's part of the in-person session, but in addition to, they still have that online component. So that's where we are now for 2021, which is interesting.
And we used to just say to our volunteers, make sure that we've always asked volunteers to do written court reports. And the lawyer for our program will take the volunteer's report and present it to the court and ask questions about it, examine witnesses, and make sure that the recommendations of the volunteer are known to the judge. But we used to just say, well, make sure you include these different things. Well, now we have beautiful court report templates so that children all across the state, when their cases are heard, someone is looking at what are this child's educational needs. Do they have needs for services with mental health? Are their physical needs being met? Do they need to go to the doctor? What about visits? So all the categories that we used to say, include these categories in your court report, now they're part of our template. And so across the state, all of the children get uniform, like a really thorough uniform look at their lives and their situations. Because in the end, the work of the volunteer, it greatly benefits the child, but the the trajectory of the volunteers' work is to make sure that their work and their court report come to a courtroom, are presented to a judge, so that the judge, who's the decision maker, has the best information possible about how to make decisions for children in their lives. So I'm sold on it for that reason. But
And you know, Cindy, and I know all of the staff can attest to having a judge spotlight someone, a volunteer's court report, because it was just so much information that really enlightened that judge on how to make that decision for that child. So it's so important having that volunteer and that court report from that other person, other than just DSS, you know, from that community volunteer that took the time out to find out what the wishes were. You know, where do you go to church? Are you used to going at a different place? You know, where do you get your hair cut? You know, let's look at all of those things, and giving that information to that judge just really paints that picture of what that child needs and what the child's wishes are. So that, and then the new templates, boy, they have just really revved up, showing that judge and painting that picture for them to see the whole, everything about that child. So that has really been great.
I think another unique perspective that I love to share when we're doing training is that community volunteer is the only one in that courtroom who's not connected to a paycheck. So you truly are looking through an objective, neutral point of view in reference to that child. So I feel like at that point, when that volunteer is sitting in court, that judge is remembering, and everyone is remembering, that that child does have a voice, because that volunteer is present not only physically in the courtroom, but through that template that's presented.
And you know, I was thinking about the volunteers that we bring in Stanley. And if a person came into our courtroom and saw the volunteers, they could see people from their community, from their neighborhood. So, and I think that's so important, because the templates give a lot of information, but they're broken down so that anybody can do this work. You know, a person with a high school diploma can do this work. So there's just so many ways that the template has helped us, you know, kind of bring in people and show them, look, it's not that difficult. It tells you, it helps you write this report and share the information about the child that you've researched and investigated, and it just helps you give a really good picture, and it's not that difficult, so anybody can do it.
I think the flexibility of the volunteer and how they can actually perform their work. So the variety of volunteers that we have in our district, it goes from the range of a person that's in college, that just maybe graduated high school, went on to college, heard about our program through the college, such as Stanley County Community College. And it can go from the range of someone who's retired to the working parent. There's such a variety of differences with the volunteer who comes to the program. So the flexibility of doing their volunteer work can range anywhere from Monday through Friday, or it could be in the evening or on the weekend, to make that contact with the child or any of the family members connected to that child.
And those college students oftentimes become interns, and they stay with this work once they're graduated. So that has been, we had a text yesterday from an intern that touched bases with us, and the program had such a great impact on her life. She continues to remain in contact with us, and it just really gave her an idea about life, and just really the opportunities that come with this program, and learning the court system can be a benefit to you in other positions as you begin your career.
you know, when we first started this conversation, I was talking about how a judge in Seattle, Washington, formally started this movement by inviting regular citizens to come and think about how they could contribute to his knowledge for decision making for kids. And I just want to catch us up now. The movement of court-appointed special advocates, or guardians ad litem, this movement has been going strong since the 70s. And I get calls from other states where programs are, and they want to know how North Carolina does it, because we have one of the strongest models for doing this work across the country. We are a national leader because we have a lawyer and a volunteer who work together with staff like these people who are supporting and guiding them to do their work. And there even now is a national movement where programs that represent children, that the national movement is to have a lawyer and a volunteer like North Carolina. But many other states just have a volunteer model, and then there might be an independent agency or the court might appoint lawyers, but the two don't work together. But when you have a guardian ad litem volunteer who is going out and interviewing mom and dad and reading medical records and talking to doctors and talking to school teachers and really spending time with the child, couple that with the work of a lawyer who can take the volunteer's court report and present it to the court in the language of the court. And it kind of, you get the legwork from the volunteer, you get the legal expertise from the lawyer, and then the judge, boom, they get great information. And I think our communities are the stronger for it.
So one thing I wanted to touch on is, which is an important role, especially of guardian ad litem staff, is the recruitment and retention of volunteer advocates. Me personally, I have been a guardian ad litem supervisor for about 1.5 years. But recruitment has evolved over the course of history from the beginning of the program until now in such a way that we have evolved into the virtual age. This has been exacerbated by the pandemic, of course, because we are careful about what we do in person, physically, and face to face with people. However, it's also just it's endemic of what age we're in now, and we are in the virtual social media age. And we have seen such a huge impact in our recruitment through social media and the internet, especially through our Facebook page. Most of us are on Facebook. Most of us share our lives on Facebook, and we utilize that. So we have a Facebook page, which is Guardian Ad Litem, Union, Stanley, Montgomery County, which I encourage all of our viewers to please like and share. But we, in my time with Guardian Ad Litem, has seen such an impact and such a positive return, and volunteers who have been attracted to our program and the visibility of our program through social media. We share content, we share events, we share success stories through our Facebook, and it spreads like incredibly throughout our community. So it has produced such a great response for attracting guardian ad litem volunteers. So I wanted to touch on just how it has evolved over the years and into the modern age, which is one of our main ways of recruiting.
As John Michael was speaking about the Facebook website, we also have the state website, which is www.volunteer, FOR, the word for, GAL.org. Not only can you find information about the history of that program, but you can also complete the online application. I think it's pretty profound when you hear directly from volunteers in the community who are trained advocates for abused and neglected children. And one of the volunteers quoted, and her name is Angie, she quoted, "I became a volunteer because I wanted to make a difference in a child's life. I no longer wanted to read about abuse incidents in paper wanting to help. I took action to help." And that's profound, and that's what a guardian ad litem does. Not only do they read the details of the case connected to that child, but they truly advocate in the community and for the child. And that's our mission, is to be the voice of the child, because there is a child waiting for their guardian ad litem.